Have you ever disliked someone a little too much? Not because they harmed you, not because they did something unforgivable, but because something about them disturbed you in a way you could not fully explain. Their confidence, their freedom, the ease with which they took up space. Maybe you know this feeling. Maybe it happened while watching someone say what you never allowed yourself to say. Maybe while seeing someone become what you were afraid to become. Or maybe while witnessing a kind of freedom you quietly taught yourself to reject. There is a man I want you to imagine. He spent 30 years being reasonable, gentle, easy to be around. He never raised his voice, never asked for too much, never took up more space than he was given. He learned very early that love had condition, and he met every one of them. One afternoon, in an ordinary restaurant, he watched a stranger laugh, loudly, freely, without looking around to check if anyone approved, and something moved in him that he had not felt in years. It was not admiration, it was not anger, it was older than both. He paid the bill, went home, and told himself he had simply been tired. But the feeling did not leave. It waited. Carl Jung called what was waiting the shadow, not the villain inside us, not the monster beneath the surface. Something quieter, and in many ways, more unsettling. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. The shadow is not only what we are afraid to become, it is what has been living through us quietly, beneath our awareness. And sometimes it is not made of evil. Sometimes it is made of everything in us that was once too alive, too honest, too intense, or too free to be accepted. A child does not arrive in the world knowing which parts of themselves must be hidden. That lesson is learned slowly, through a parent's silence after an outburst, through the praise that comes when you are quiet, useful, agreeable, easy. Through the moment you discovered that certain emotions made the people you needed feel uncomfortable, and you decided without words that those emotions were the problem. So you adapted. If anger was punished, you became agreeable. If sadness was ignored, you learned to smile through pain. If confidence made others uncomfortable, you made yourself smaller. If honesty caused conflict, silence became a strategy. This was not weakness, it was survival. A child creates a mask because they want to belong. They want to remain connected to the people their survival depends on. But time passes. The mask becomes familiar, then automatic. Then, somewhere along the way, we stop noticing we are wearing it. We say, "This is just who I am." And that sentence, spoken quietly with complete sincerity, may be one of the most consequential lies we ever tell ourselves. Because sometimes, personality is not the whole truth. Sometimes, it is an old protection that never learned it could rest. What the mask hides does not disappear. It goes underground. And underground without light, without air, without the maturity we have gained since childhood, it does not rest. It ferments. Anger swallowed for decades becomes a resentment so deep it feels like personality. Desire never allowed to speak becomes obsession or a quiet, nameless bitterness. Power consistently rejected turns inward and becomes the strange inability to fully inhabit your own life. What we refuse to see in ourselves does not become harmless. It becomes invisible, and invisible things have no limits. Here is where most people misunderstand Jung. They hear shadow and think only of darkness, of rage, jealousy, cruelty. And yes, all of that can live there. But Jung understood something more difficult, and in some ways more confronting. The shadow can also contain what is luminous. Buried alongside the anger and the envy, there may be courage you were told was arrogance, ambition you rejected because you feared what it said about you, sensitivity you hardened because the world did not seem to have space for it, a desire for beauty, depth, or creative truth that you quietly dismantled, piece by piece, because it felt like a luxury you could not afford. This is why the man in the restaurant felt what he felt, not because the stranger was doing something wrong, because the stranger was doing something the man had spent 30 years teaching himself not to do. Be fully present in his own life. This is what projection reveals. When a reaction is larger than the situation warrants, when someone's confidence disturbs you more than it should, when another person's freedom produces something that feels almost like grief, that intensity is not weakness. It is information. The question is not what is wrong with them. The deeper question is, what are they carrying that I once put down? And envy, the emotion we bury fastest because we mistake it for smallness, may be the clearest signal of all. You see someone creating without apology, and something tightens inside you. You watch someone speak their truth without softening it, and you feel admiration laced with pain. You see someone living with a freedom you cannot explain, and suddenly, your own life feels smaller than it did a moment ago. That pain is not pettiness. It is the pressure of an unlived life, pressing from the inside. It is not telling you to copy them. It is asking you to listen. There is a particular danger Jung identified, and that modern life has perfected. The danger of the person who is very, very good at being good, who has so thoroughly identified with their virtue, their patience, their image of calm, that they have no room left for anything that contradicts it. These are the people who act from anger while calling it honesty, who avoid every conflict while calling it peace, who control everything around them while calling it care, who have found in the pursuit of light a more sophisticated way to avoid the dark. Because what is rejected does not become purified, it becomes unconscious. And unconscious things do not wait politely. They act through us, in the resentments we cannot explain, in the patterns we keep repeating, in the quiet exhaustion of maintaining a self that is admired but not fully inhabited. A person who lives only through the approved version of themselves pays a price that rarely appears on the surface. They become admired but unseen, successful but disconnected, peaceful on the outside, while quietly, methodically, avoiding every honest encounter with themselves. And sooner or later the cost arrives, not always dramatically. Sometimes as a low, persistent sense that the life being lived, however correct it looks, is missing something essential, something that was not lost, something that was abandoned. To meet the shadow is not to surrender to it. Shadow integration is not permission to be cruel, reckless, or destructive under the banner of authenticity. That would not be freedom. That would be a different kind of possession, exchanging one unconscious pattern for another. What integration asks is more difficult and more precise. It asks you to look at what is there, clearly without the story you have been telling about it, and relate to it differently. The anger that once controlled you can become a boundary. The desire that once shamed you can become a compass. The fear that once chose your life for you can become information. The power you rejected can become responsibility. The energy does not disappear, only the relationship to it changes. And that shift, from unconscious to conscious, from hidden to held, is where transformation actually lives. Not in dramatic moments, not only in breakthroughs, but in the ordinary instant, when you notice the reaction before it speaks for you. When you feel the old pull towards smallness, and you choose this once not to obey it. When you say something true in a room that expects you to be quiet. The goal is not to become perfect, it is to become whole. There is a difference. Perfection wants to remove contradiction. Wholeness learns how to hold it consciously. A whole person can be kind without repressing anger, peaceful without fearing conflict, humble without rejecting power, spiritual without pretending to be beyond human emotion. This is the deeper maturity Jung's shadow points toward. Not a flawless image, a self less divided against itself. And this requires tenderness, not the kind that avoids difficulty, but the kind that can hold it without flinching. The kind that can say, I see this anger, and I will not be ruled by it, but I will not pretend it is not there. I see this envy, and I will ask what it is pointing toward. I see this fear, and I will listen, but I will not let it choose my life. This is how the shadow stops being an enemy and begins to become a guide. The man from the restaurant did not burn his life down. He did not leave his job, abandon his relationships, or reinvent himself overnight. He simply began to notice the moments he edited himself before speaking. The choice is made not from desire, but from the fear of being too much. The old familiar shrinking, so automatic he had stopped calling it a choice. And slowly, without drama, he began to make different ones. Slowly, imperfectly, but honestly. Each small act of return said something to the part of him that had been underground for 30 years. You are allowed to exist again, and yes, there was grief. Grief for the years spent pretending. For the times he chose approval over truth, comfort over growth, image over aliveness. But that grief was not a sign that something had gone wrong. It was a sign that something was waking up. There may be an unlived life inside you, not somewhere distant, not behind a door you cannot find, closer than that. In the opinion you softened before speaking it, in the creative work you have been preparing to begin for years, in the relationship where you perform instead of appear, in the version of yourself you allow only in private, and even then, not fully. The shadow has not been punishing you for ignoring it. It has been waiting, with the patience of something that knows it cannot be destroyed, only denied. Jung did not promise that confronting the shadow would be comfortable. He pointed towards something more valuable, that the person willing to look honestly without the protection of their own image may find not only the darkness they feared, but the depth they forgot, their own grief, their own power, their own desire to be more fully alive. The shadow is not your enemy. It is the part of you that refused to disappear when you stopped listening. And it is still here, still carrying what you buried, still waiting for the moment you are ready to stop being afraid of your own depth and reclaim the life that was always yours. If something in this reflection moved you, not as an idea, but as a recognition, stay close to the veiled truth. This is a space for those willing to look without turning away. The truth is veiled, but it is not hidden from those who choose to see.